Welcome back to the class, everyone. As I'm sure you're all well aware of by now, because it's everyone's favorite game mode, 3v3 GAC is upon us, and typically around this time I would take a minute to look at all the best characters and teams that we could possibly build for that specific game mode. However, this month I want to take a different look and check out some of the teams that have been forgotten along the way that maybe you shouldn't have been in the first place. So that pretty much sums up today's video. We want to be talking about some of the underrated and underestimated teams of 3v3. These are obviously not going to be the best of the best that everybody already knows. We're not going to be talking about Galactic Legends, nor are we going to talk about Conquest characters that require 3 GAC Omicrons, but trying to look for specific teams that are quite good, but at the same time really don't get as much credit as they could for what they're able to do. And first up is going to be this Kylo Ren Unmasked team with Sith Trooper and First Order TIE Pilot. Now, the real hero here, quite awkwardly enough, is not the Omicron character, nor is it the newer First Order character, which I guess he's kind of old by now, but he's one of the newer ones. But it's actually going to be Kylo Ren Unmasked. He is just a broken character, always has been for 3v3. There's a lot of reasons for this. His kit is very good, but one of the big reasons is his halt ability, which is a 2-turn irresistible stun. While it's good in 5v5 for a multitude of reasons, in 3v3 it's a huge pain in the butt because it has a cooldown of 3, which means you can use it pretty consistently, and getting to isolate 1/3 of your enemy's team is very helpful, especially when we typically only have 1 damage dealer per team in 3v3. But really where this team is going to shine is because of Crew's leadership that does a lot of, fun stat bonuses here with crit damage and speed. But more importantly, it is going to give health and protection back whenever they get a status effect. Where this is mostly going to shine is being used as an offensive tool, which I realize might be weird for some people because a lot of times the Crew team was viewed as a defensive team. But when you use it as an offensive tool, this specific lineup, it actually becomes a very solid counter for a lot of teams out there, most notably Night Sisters. And the reason is because whenever they gain a debuff, aka Plague, they are going to recover health and therefore cleanse it off pretty much immediately. They have a steady amount of damage that doesn't really go away, and again, with Crew's overall kit, he's constantly going to be giving the rest of the team advantage because he's the only taunting tank and they're going to be forced to hit him over and over again. And then once you start looking at Sith, First Order, not Sith, First Order TIE Pilots Omicron, you realize that you were getting all of that damage, speed, as well as max health to be able to tank a lot of those hits and be able to get going. The only downside to this team is because the team does not start with advantage because you don't have Hux or Phasma on the team, you are going to have to be a little bit slower start, but specifically against Night Sisters, it's not really that big of a deal because typically Night Sisters teams are not that fast. Granted, that is mostly speaking against teams that do not have Marin. It actually does well against Marin from a data standpoint, but there's also like 7 battles total, so we might need to test that out more. Next up is going to be the Starkiller team, and the reason why I like this team is because if you've done the correct farms, it's essentially an entirely free team. Starkiller herself is required at Relic 5 for Afra, and then Captain Han Solo and Rebel Leia Organa are actually required for 2 different entire legendaries, or rather 1 Galactic Legend and 1 Legendary. Whether it be needing R3 or R5, it kind of gives you the same results. And the reason why I like this team is because it fits the exact definition of underestimated. A lot of people out there will immediately look at the team, they will see a few Rebels and no real premium characters like CLS or maybe 3PO and immediately think, oh, I can just Wampa this. Well, when you actually look at it, it only works about half the time, which is great for a team that you essentially had left over that you had only built up because of other legendary requirements. And the reason why we're talking about this comp specifically and not one of the tanks that Sana seems to be specifically outfit for is you have to look at the very specific abilities that we're getting in here, where we have Sana herself, who is able to inflict tenacity down, which at that point it doesn't matter how much tenacity Wampa has at all because tenacity down is like negative 9,999. And then good old Captain Han Solo has Daze on his basic, which will land, do the tenacity down, and then our good friend Rolo on top of that will have the ability block. So you have an ability block, Dazed, tenacity down Wampa that really can't do anything because he can't gain turn meter, nor can he cleanse it off because of the ability block. And then the Rebel Barrage will eventually start to do a lot of damage because all 10 of those hits are going to be hitting the same random target because it's the only target out there that's available. Now, this will not work every time as a defensive measure because if you hit Wampa in just the right way, and by you I mean the AI, to apply the tenacity down before the other debuffs can land, and the opponent was smart enough to hold their cleanse, then the whole thing kind of goes down the tubes. But 50% win rate really is not good, especially for Wampa, who seems to have a much higher ceiling in 3v3. And quite frankly, for some people out there, Wampa eating their Captain Han Solo and Rolo might actually not be that bad of a trade. Next up is going to be this Bossk team. And the reason why we talk about this one specifically is because bounty hunters can be split up in a lot of cool ways in 3v3. You can take Fennec and Grief on their own team. You can take Boba Fett with Dengar. We'll talk about that team in a second. But this team is really neat because it is essentially a guaranteed contract, assuming you don't die. And the reason why that is actually relevant is because Bossk, to be able to hit contract, they have to be able to hit the weakest enemy 10 times. While you have two characters who can ignore taunt, which within itself seems like it would be enough, but sometimes it's actually not, because there are actually characters out there who are fairly weak that like to stealth. Talon is a really great example of that. A lot of people for a while they were liking to put Savage-led Malik and Talon teams. This was actually what was the best counter, because you could get contract every single time, because our good friend Boba Fett, Scion of Django, has this ability that is an AoE, and then on top of it, it is actually going to heal the rest of the team, because he's trying to apply a bunch of debuffs while doing so at the same time, which coincides very well with Bossk team. Not to mention having high protection against teams that do max health damage was a nice bet on top of that. So with a guaranteed contract, again, assuming the enemy team doesn't have enough offense to just obliterate you immediately, then the Mandalorian himself will come in and zap someone out, and then you just pick off the team slowly after that. So a little bit of an underestimated team or underrated team, because a lot of people look at Boba Fett, Scion of Django, they think 3v3, or not 3v3, they think TW and just kind of leave the whole team behind. Now, speaking of the bounty hunter teams, we've talked about this one just a little bit before, and it's just a messy defensive team. In all honesty, it's not very great, nor is it going to cause a lot of holds, but it does create a lot of banner loss, because you can't really predict all that well what the team is going to do unless you're taking something a lot heavier like a Han Solo and Chewbacca type team. And what I mean by that is Zam Wessell, while her Omicron is not as good as it is in 5v5 because she has less allies to give and spread bonuses to, you are still getting a fair amount of speed. The reason why that matters is because when she goes first at her high base speed, due to what we just talked about, she's going to land out debuffs, and when she lands out debuffs, she is going to inherently give the rest of the team 15 speed per enemy that got the debuff. The reason why this can kind of be a pain is if you're trying to clock out the enemy team just perfectly so you can get in before Boba Fett ability blocks everyone, sometimes you just can't clock it quite right, because you don't know if the enemy team is going to get 15 speed or 30 speed or 45 speed or 0 speed, just because of how resisting debuffs works. Even if Zam has a ton of potency, you can't just automatically assume she's going to land all the debuffs, because there's always a 15% chance to resist it, making the team just kind of unpredictable. And while it is not, again, the strongest team out there, it does have some fun thermal detonator synergy with our good friend Dengar in there. The stat boosts from Zam sometimes are underestimated. And then Boba Fett's lead, while being super old, it actually does have a lot of fun things in it. 50% critical damage is always good. We have some nice max health equal to total potency, the turn meter thing for thermal detonators. There's a lot going on there. It actually reminds me a lot of, awkwardly enough, Hunter from the Bad Batches kit, because everything it does seems to be doing two different things at once, or it seems to be leveraging other things that are in the team. And last but not least is going to be Trench, and I guess we're continuing this theme of TW characters that are actually good in GAC, and Trench really fits that model for 3v3, and he's going to be a little bit similar to the Sauna team up top, where the team's real value isn't the fact that people look at it, they're like, meh, and they throw Bad Batch or something they think will beat it because they've consistently beaten inferior versions of the team, and then they lose and you get a hold and it's glorious. Now, the big caveat with this, and the reason why maybe it is not consistently estimated properly, is because you really need Wat Tambor with the team for it to be any good at all. The team will suffer heavily if they have no way to cleanse their way out of things, because Admiral Trench here has this really nice thing where he consistently gains a ton of turn meter and then keeps taking turns, and it will end up fearing, stunning, shocking. The team has a lot of great tools overall between stealth and ability block, but if you do not have Wat Tambor on here to bail you out of some areas, a lot of people will try to put Django or GBA, and those teams aren't necessarily complete garbage, but this is by far the superior team that will have you holding versus teams like Wampa, like Bad Batch, that a lot of people are just prone to using because they're normally beating bad trench teams that people are putting on defense because they don't really know what else to put. So those are going to be our 5 underestimated or underrated 3v3 teams. Again, highlighting the fact that Bossk and the crew team are more offense-minded in general, and then the Sonastaros, other bounty hunter team, and trench are more defense-minded. But do as you wish. Hope you guys liked the video. Until the next time, stay awesome.